The other aspect of this is also self-sufficiency or self-service, and that's the ability for our customers to develop on their own, either through training, through Trailhead, and what that provides. So let me do this before we continue on with some questions that I'll be asking this panel, and then we'll hand it over to you to ask some questions from the audience as well. Let's start from Deena, and if you would pass the microphone down, Darryl. And if we can just kind of go from Deena all the way down to Jacqueline, if you can introduce yourselves, a little bit about your company, a little bit about what you do, and appreciate that.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Deena Tearney. I'm the CEO and founder of Pacific Point. We are a Hawaii-based Salesforce consulting firm. I guess my background is a lot of consulting before moving to Hawaii, and specifically a lot of CRM consulting. So it's kind of what I knew. When I moved to Hawaii, I saw that there wasn't really any CRM in town. And so it took a few years to kind of get that going, but it's certainly in my DNA, if you will. I started my career that way and felt like there was a great opportunity to bring Salesforce to our market here in Hawaii. And it's, like I said, it's kind of what I know. So that's us.
Hi, everyone. My name is Darryl Lemecha, and I'm one of the two co-founders of eightCloud. We formed the company back in 2011, and we were trying to create a company that was different, not like every other consulting company. Ajay Nair is the other co-founder, and I had spent 25 plus years in IT, and we had seen all kinds of good and bad consulting companies, and we tried to bring all those best practices together into one. We pioneered managed services, which is a continuous delivery mechanism with Salesforce, and we formed an organization that has some really top-notch individuals. While we started in managed services, we now have projects, so we split our revenue about 50-50 between projects as well as our original managed services work. We also do commercial as well as public sector work. So we work with both of those. On the public sector side, we're doing work in about 8 different states, including the state of Hawaii. And on the commercial side, we do work with insurance companies, financial services, all kinds of organizations that where trust is super important. So I'm great. It's great that Tiffany mentioned the word trust, because when you think about eightCloud, I'd like you to think about community, trust, expertise, and passion, because we certainly have a passion for eightCloud, for Salesforce, and eightCloud too.
All right, hi there. My name is Kevin Tamura. I am the account executive for DocuSign for the state of Hawaii. And typically, first reaction when you hear DocuSign is e-signature, right? And so just kind of taking a step back or looking at it from a high level, really the direction our organization has taken over the last 12 months or so is really taking an approach of digitizing the entire document lifecycle. So not even thinking about just e-signature, but thinking about how do we prepare and generate a document? How do we collaborate on a document? And ultimately, how do we store and archive that in a secure manner? So our relevance to Salesforce is that we provide these digital functionalities and the ability to digitize these workflows all within your Salesforce instance. So providing a FedRAMP authorized solution to manage documents, to redline and approve documents. So a little bit about what we do, and we'll be, I think I'm up at 2, so we'll hear a little bit more about that then. So thank you.
Good morning. My name is William Westmoreland. I'm with Launchpad. I'm the Vice President of Product Management. Our product really focuses on workforce development and economic development. The product's been around for about 6 years. It is an ISV product that rides on top of the Salesforce platform. My background, I have been in workforce development and economic development for about 10 years. I worked for state workforce boards and economic development corporations in the mainland and became a customer of Launchpad. I was really impressed with the product, with the Salesforce platform as well in terms of development, and decided to come to work for them. And we'll be talking about our product here a little bit later this morning. Sorry.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Callanta. I am your training account executive representing from Salesforce. So it's my role to make sure that you guys are getting the most out of your Salesforce investment through training and enablement, and we happen to do that through Trailhead. So how many of you are already familiar with Trailhead? I know Doug had mentioned it earlier. Awesome, okay. And how many of you are Rangers? Hey. And you don't count because you're an instructor. Yeah, that's a tough one. But Anyway, our Trailhead makes it's made up of three main components. So our online learning system, which is free, and it's gamified. So every single module that you take, you're learning about how to use Salesforce. And as you do that, you're collecting badges. As you earn those badges, you move up in the ranks. So it gets pretty competitive on our end over here at Trailhead, which is really fun. We also do instructor-led training courses. I know we've run one a successful one here in Hawaii for admins and developers. We have amazing instructors who can teach you anything and everything about Salesforce from a technical perspective. And then we also have training services, such as change management or custom end-user training. So I will be around here all day. Feel free to grab me. I actually represent Salesforce for all of you here in the Hawaii government and state sector, so I'm happy to help in any questions that you may have later on.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for introducing themselves. So what I'm going to do right now is I'll just jump around between each of you, asking you some questions, get some feedback in terms of some areas that I think would be of interest to our audience, and then we'll probably conclude with some Q&A from the audience as well. So Deena, let me start with you. In terms of your development methodology, how do you work with customers? Is it agile? Is it hybrid? Is it waterfall-ish? And how does the platform make it suitable for your development approach?
Okay, good question. So a little bit of it depends on our customer, but at the foundation of our methodology, we take what we call a business process-driven approach. And what that means is when we start off a project, we're really focusing on what is the business process that our clients have, and it's what we found to be the most productive way to gather effective requirements. Because when we throw up a screen of Salesforce or any other technology for that matter and say, hey, what do you want on the screen? It's really tough to answer that question. But when you start thinking about how do you process this type of application, how do you deal with this type of sales opportunity, and we start mapping out business processes, we identify who the actors are, and one of those actors is Salesforce. It helps us identify very clearly, not just for us as a development team, but also for our client, exactly what they're going to get. So we start off with that, then we move into a little bit more of an agile development process, agile design and build. And it really is a little bit of it depends on customers too, because some customers, they'll want to see the demos. Some we've encouraged them to actually get their hands on as we do that iterative design and build process. But the idea is we want them to see and feel the system as much as possible so they can provide more detailed design information as we go through the process. And then we kind of cut things off. We like to lock things down to an extent because otherwise it's kind of controlling a scope and budget for everyone. And then we move into more of a waterfall traditional thing that maybe everyone's familiar with, user acceptance testing, training, and then our implementation. And then after that, we kind of roll into support, which can be managed a few different ways. But that, at the end of the day, we're really trying to focus on starting with business process, keeping what are those users doing at the top of our minds, and it helps us through our entire project as people start thinking about how am I going to test this system? They know who the actors are. They know what their process is. How do they train their users? They'll know what the process is. And so it helps kind of feed us through that entire project. Okay,
thanks, Deena. Let me jump over to an ISV question. So Kevin, from your standpoint, Spring CM and DocuSign, how do you work with SIs? How does an App Exchange product, an App Exchange solution work with a system integrator?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think when we were just e-signature, the issue was that we were too simple to use, right? Like, no, SIs didn't really want to work with us. There wasn't enough work to do. So now you look at it as how we've expanded into this agreement cloud concept and getting into, again, more aspects of the document lifecycle. We're seeing more and more SIs packaging DocuSign with some of their solutions and what they have going on. So, there's a couple different avenues, whether it's prepackaged with an SI's offering, or we're seeing where an SI is coming into, working with a customer and finding within those business requirements that, hey, this is kind of outside of the scope of what, just Salesforce alone would provide. And that's where they would typically engage us and we'd jump in there.
Great, well, thanks. So let me ask you, Jacqueline, from a training perspective, how do you determine where Trailhead ends and classroom training begins? What's the balance between online training versus classroom training?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's pretty unique for every single customer and every single organization. So a couple things to think about when you're deciding whether to do something self-paced online through Trailhead or whether you're going into a classroom setting is, first and foremost, do I have enough time? It's a lot of time, right, to dedicate 5 days to training for your admin certification. So is that something realistically I can do and pull myself away from my day-to-day role? So timing is one. Second thing is learning style. So how do you best learn? I know for me, I need to be sitting in a classroom, but for some brilliant minds out there, you can do everything self-paced online, so that's wonderful. I always like to recommend a blended learning approach when it comes to training and enablement, especially for your technical space. So maybe starting with some Trailhead, figuring out what it is that I need to know more about. Then jumping into a classroom training and saying, okay, here's where I'm really going to dive in, I'm going to get certified, and then continuing that learning. Something that Doug talked about also was that continuous learning and that growth mindset. So that's something that we can definitely help with Trailhead, and make sure that you're aligning yourself with a longer term learning plan, so that way you're continuing to grow, continuing to learn, and a Trailhead AE such as myself can help you build out those plans. So not just one class recommendation, but what does that path look like? What does that journey look like to continue your education using both Trailhead and classroom training?
Great, thanks, Jacqueline. Darryl, let me ask you, as a system integrator, as helping customers develop an application, how do you help them see the possibilities of the platform and what can be done in development as you're going through their process? And also, how do you help them with their requirements in terms of translating that from what may be traditional in a client server or a COTS application to something that's cloud-based, where you have this configuration model with Salesforce versus, say, custom code?
Yeah, it's again, a very good question. So I want to emphasize something that Deena said, or Deena, pardon me, said earlier, and that is we have found that people need to see before they can really understand what they want. I've been a CIO in the past, and I've seen that across every industry and every organization I've ever been in. So it's really cool with Salesforce. You've got all of the standard Salesforce packaged applications. You've got thousands and thousands of components, both Lightning components as well as AppExchange managed packages on AppExchange. And you can throw those together in a sandbox really, really, really quickly. And it may not be exactly what someone is wanting, but it starts to really show people what can be. What can their vision be? How can it be implemented? How can that fit into the Salesforce ecosystem? So we like to really start there. We like to spend a lot of time in show and tell and go through an iterative discovery process at the very beginning. Really dig deep into how do you do things today? What are the operational issues? And then here's an idea. Here's another idea. Why don't we show you this? Why don't we show you that? And through that process and a lot of demoing, people start to get the vision for what Salesforce can deliver. We then drive into, okay, what are all the personas and the use cases and all of that kind of work? But that comes at the back end. We first want to create that shared vision of where to take the Salesforce platform.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate that. So let me ask you, William, when it comes to an AppExchange solution, why should a customer look at an AppExchange solution, and kind of what's the balance between going the AppExchange route versus maybe doing it themselves or looking for someone to help them?
So in the case of Launchpad, we have about 4,500 hours invested in our functional footprint at this point. So immediately we can bring a functional product to you, have it up and running really quickly. From there, we use an iterative approach to modify it and really customize it to your business processes. But there's a lot of things within our industry. E-signature is a perfect example that we wouldn't want to invest our limited resources in developing. So we're able to go to the AppExchange, form partnerships with agencies and companies to extend the functionality of our platform really quickly with a leader in the industry, so that we don't have to spend that time developing that resource. And you can quickly, as you were speaking to, bring that into a test environment, get it up and going and functional really quickly. And that to me, is the true value of the AppExchange.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So getting to be up to speed with Salesforce is important, not only helping with the help of an SI, with the help of an App Exchange product, but just general learning. Doug alluded to this, we've talked about this. So Jacqueline, from your standpoint, what's the best way to get started? What can an individual do? What can an organization do? And how can an organization's management better help their employees, help the resources that they have within an agency, a department, a business unit to go through that learning process and be able to help manage that?
Yeah, definitely. When it comes to Salesforce, there's so many different resources that you have available and from all of our wonderful partners that we have up here. So I think first and foremost is just getting familiar with Trailhead, making sure that you're getting in there, just doing some quick searches for some things that you are interested in. As far as implementation goes, I think there's a ton I could probably say about it, but I'll save your attention spans. I think the one main thing is just to make sure that you're investing in your employees, in your people early, and you're doing it often. Because we see a lot of these implementations that go on, and I'm sure you guys do as well, where they build the technology out and it looks amazing, but then they forget about the people and the ones that are actually using the technology. So to make sure very, very early on you're setting aside time, you're setting aside resources, you're setting aside a budget to make sure that this isn't something that goes to the wayside. Really making sure that we're investing in what that change is going to look like for all of your employees. Because, I mean, I know and you all know that change is never easy. So if you're implementing something brand new, creating that technology is good, but making sure that everyone's excited about it is something that's going to help you in the long run. And making sure that we have some strong value proposition to say, hey, this change is happening and it's going to help you do your job a lot better. It's going to help you make more money if you're in sales or help you serve your customers better. So that way, then you can start thinking about how all of those pieces are connected. I think the second piece, too, is when it comes to implementing that technology or working with our partners, making sure that you have people on your side that are within the government that are certified as admins or developers. That way, once the partners have completed that build, then you have a team that's ready to go and already knows how we're going to continue to maintain your instance of Salesforce successfully.
Yeah, I think one thing I'd like to add to that, too, is that what we usually recommend is when you're doing an implementation or a project, when you get to system test prior to going to UAT, because our partners are usually going to be developing an application specifically for your requirements and your use case. But when you're going to go in that system test, it's a good time, if you haven't already, to do training for your users, for your individuals, to get a general knowledge of what Salesforce is all about, so that when you do get into UAT, and that user acceptance testing, you now have the ability to make that relevant, and you have the background to go along with it. And I think that's critical. The other thing, too, is that we do have the ability for managers to track and see exactly how their employees are doing relative to Trailhead, which can then provide better performance levels at the same time. I think one of the things we also talk about, too, is that especially those of you that are here at state agencies, and especially if you're getting funding from federal dollars, one of the things you typically see many times, especially through system integrators, is you get a transfer system. And transfer system, it could be something in unemployment insurance, it could be around workman's compensation, it could be around integrated eligibility, various solutions. And what tends to happen is when you have a transfer system, it tends to get dropped onto an agency and a department, and they learn specifically that application through the eyes of that particular ISV, or excuse me, through that particular SI. And utilizing other technology, whether it's on-premise technology or COTS-based applications, it tends to be very narrow. The applications that we develop on Salesforce, our partners develop on Salesforce, our independent software vendors develop on Salesforce, are designed to be much broader. So the idea there is that you're not locked into just this type of application. We want to make sure that you as customers have the ability to have, again, that art of the possible that Tiffany talked about and we talk about often. And so we want to make sure that, again, training is always a part of that. You're always learning. And back to Alvin Toffler, right? Learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that's always important. So Deena, back to you in terms from an SI perspective. When you're building out solutions, do you suggest certain apps off the App Exchange to your customers that kind of get there a little bit faster? Are there some utilities, other specific solutions that you offer?
Yeah. Yes, in short. The App Exchange is a really interesting place. I think I would kind of bucket the products that you see, and it's good that we have two examples of this, because in my mind, I sort of separate them into these products that are more like utilities, like e-signature, document management, things of that nature, mail merge. Those are like utilities that sort of plug into Salesforce. So when you buy them, they're sort of plugging in that feature functionality they themselves have. Then you have products like Launchpad, right, that are more business processes or operational applications that are built on the Salesforce platform. So there's kind of like two flavors of what you generally will find in the Salesforce App Exchange. And so absolutely, it really depends on what's happening. I think it's a little easier to evaluate something that is like a more of a utility frame, because you're looking at simple things like cost, how much volume am I doing, is it worth it, for maintenance and things like that. When you go on the other side, you're really now having to look at process. How much time do I get to save by going with this pre-built solution? How am I planning to maintain it? What are the upgrade implications? So it can be a little more complicated, but you certainly can save a lot of time by going that route. But you've got to kind of look at it becomes more factors to look at as we, help our clients kind of go through that. Utilities are a little bit easier to kind of help our clients evaluate and determine which ones are the right ones. But yes, we do.
So William, let me ask you, you're Vice President of Product, correct? And so as such, from an App Exchange perspective, Salesforce, we update our platform throughout the year. There are 3 updates that we do every 4 months throughout the year. And so how does Launchpad, how do you as an App Exchange, as an ISV, keep up with that pace?
I don't think we do. It can be very challenging. What is nice about the innovation that Salesforce brings to product development is they do push us, right? There's always new technology coming out, new ways of looking at things, and we become kind of the intermediate body between their customer base and the technologies that they're bringing to them. And a lot of times we find ourselves really, championing that art of the possible, so that the agencies we work with can take advantage of that. In the space we're in, we're often replacing systems that are extremely outdated. They're relying on old technology, typically on-premise technologies that are just far out of date. And often what we're doing is we're bringing them, miles ahead, and keeping up with Salesforce innovation, making sure that we have that functionality or taking advantage of that functionality in our product is important, because it allows you guys to really push faster, forward faster, and get to an environment where you are able to provide a great customer experience.
Well, great, thanks. And again, we always push this idea of you have the ability to take advantage of the fact that Salesforce does these updates every 4 months. And the idea that whether you're a small 2-person operation working at dry cleaners, here or anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, or you're Japan Airlines and you have 500,000 users, it is kind of that line that you hear a lot, where a rising tide raises all boats. Everyone's on the same code base. So when you ask someone typically, what version of Oracle or PeopleSoft are you on, they'll give you whatever that version might be. And in contrast to that with Salesforce, everyone is on the same version. And what makes that possible is multi-tenancy. And that's one of the unique elements of Salesforce, is that multi-tenant environment that's different than single tenancy that you typically see with other types of application platforms. One of the things, you kind of talk a little bit about training and application development. So Darryl, from your perspective, how do you balance kind of that application training that you provide versus Trailhead or other Salesforce general training? So from your perspective, when you are delivering for a customer, how do you kind of handle that balance? What do you recommend? What's your approach for that?
Yeah, so I think, we heard a lot of the answers to that question already. We're in alignment with the idea of get started early, go through the Trailhead trainings early on, get an understanding of Salesforce. By the time, as you said, Bob, by the time you get to the point where system testing is underway and you're getting into user acceptance testing, you need to have a good understanding of just the core Salesforce, how it works, so that when you're going into user acceptance testing, you really have a perspective on what could Salesforce do for you and what is a solution doing for you. If you go in blind, then, I think, again, as you said, Bob, you're going to have this perspective of what the SI built for you, and that may not be your complete vision. So we like to see that path going on in parallel, and then we always do hands-on training for the actual solution itself. We'll generally deliver some documentation, a training guide, and then we'll do some classroom training, because most people don't want to do everything online. Again, they want to see it, they want to feel it, and they want to touch that solution. And the best time to do that is user acceptance testing. So we do a bit of training, go into user acceptance testing, do a bit more training, go into the next part of user acceptance testing, and we sort of iterate through that.
Great, thanks, Darryl. So Kevin, obviously you talked about electronic signature, but another element recently is kind of the merger of Spring CM and DocuSign together. So content management is something, and content in general is something we all seek, whether it's podcasts or blogging, content's the name of the game. So can you talk a little bit about Spring CM and how that is working in conjunction with DocuSign?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So Spring CM was a company that, prior to our acquisition of Spring, they were a Salesforce Platinum partner, one of the top 25 ISVs of Salesforce, actually. And the need that they fulfilled was this ability to, well, initially, as Bob mentioned, the ability to manage content. So within your Salesforce instance, rather than relying on just the Salesforce file storage, being able to create a more complex structure, right? Be able to create a folder structure, taxonomy, define user access, and also be able to create that within a FedRAMP provision environment. So we went ahead and acquired that, as we're a big partner of Salesforce. We're a customer, and they're an investor and a customer. So kind of a symbiotic relationship there, but it just really made sense in terms of our solution and recognizing this fully digital environment, a more connected environment for documents and document management. So we're well down the road in the acquisition and how that's integrated into our product. We're about, I think, over a year now, and coming up on our customer conference next year, you'll start to see the branding and everything start shifting. We already have a connector that integrates all the components together, but you'll see that more and more seamlessly integrated kind of as time goes on. So,
Great, well, thank you. We talk about training often, early, often, and continuously. So what kind of feedback, Jacqueline, do you get from customers regarding training, regarding Trailhead? Kind of the good, the bad, and maybe not the ugly, but maybe not the attractive one.
There's no such thing. I'm just kidding. Whoa, that's a good one. I mean, as far as feedback from our technical training classes, those are, folks that are getting certified as admins or developers. We have really positive feedback about our instructors. I know we ran one here in Hawaii, so I can't wait to talk to you all a little bit more about that. But our instructors are amazing. They're certified. They're very, very good. We have one here, Chuck. You can talk to him later as well. He teaches a lot of our classes too. So excited to have you all connect with him. And then just again to reiterate the point as far as the scary feedback, or not as attractive feedback, but it comes around when it comes to the people, right? And that resistance from their employees and us not being there in that moment that it needs to happen. So again, just reiterating that we need to think about this very, very early and managing what that change looks like, managing what the training is going to look like for all of the end users and all of the technical folks that are going to be involved in this change. So yeah, I think that's the biggest one for us.
Yeah, the one thing to point out too, and we don't have necessarily represented up here, excuse me, is our customer success team. Mm-hmm. So for those of you that are customers in the room, I know Bryce Fuji, who's here with ETS and works in Doug's group. We have a customer success manager. And so Melissa English is the person that's assigned for the state of Hawaii. And the idea behind our customer success team is they are part of a greater initiative called CFL, Customers for Life. And that's, of course, what we'd like to have you all be customers for a long period of time. But your customer success manager, he or she, is designed to be able to help you get the most of your investment in Salesforce. And there are a number of trainings and accelerators that they offer. But usually, I'm not going to be, as much as I am here to help support you, I really recommend that our customers work directly with our CSM, because he or she, again, they're looking at how you can be successful. And we conduct quarterly success reviews, and they are exactly that. We suggest that every quarter, have an evaluation. How are you doing? What are you taking advantage of Salesforce, our licensing? How's adoption? We can look in. We can't see your data, but we can see your metadata. And we can see how many people are logging in, how many licenses are apportioned. Are you getting everything that you can out of Salesforce? And if not, how are we going to help you? So the idea from our standpoint is to make you successful every day and continue that into the future. And so the platform allows that type of elasticity and the growth to be able to grow with you at the same time. Before I get to questions from the audience, I'd like to go maybe one more time, starting with Deena all the way down to Jacqueline, maybe to make a comment, add something that we didn't cover that you think is important that you'd like to be able to share with the audience.
I mean, I feel like it's been hit on a lot, but I think when I look at our clients in general, not just public sector, but across the board, because we have commercial as well as public sector, we talked a lot about change management. If there was one piece that I would say everyone should focus on, it's certainly early opt-in training, really stakeholder involvement from the executive level down is really, really critical. And I would say that that's one thing that is an observation for us, that we could see more success in even identifying very early who will be the administrator, who will be developers, and who can be turned over from the beginning of the project, helping to identify those people. Because once you get towards the end, it's a little bit trickier, and then you're getting caught up. So that'd be one piece.
That's the one I wanted to talk about. So number 2 on my list would be, I'd like to go back to actually the very first slide, or one of the first slides that was showing as you were walking up, and that was the slide, clicks not code. It's really important. Again, being a CIO in the past, everybody that's in, an IT group or a business group in the organization knows if you build something, you have to maintain it, and maintaining it costs money. So I would really encourage you to, look at the Salesforce platform, look at all of the AppExchange, Lightning components, all of those things, and see if you can get to 80% of what you need without a single piece of code. That is really in your best interest. We love it when that is the case as an SI. And we really like that because it's very easy for us then to transition that, as was mentioned, to an internal team that has some Salesforce configuration skills. So again, keep in your mind, clicks, not code. You only want to do configuration. You want to bolt on as many pieces as possible, and that'll be your lowest total cost of ownership over the life of the application.
Yes, I understand. Clicks, not code. I was actually going to patent a T-shirt that said "Clicks for America" as opposed to "Code for America." So.
So one final bit I'd like to add, and this is just from feedback from other customers. When you're looking at existing in more of a connected environment, as Tiffany has talked about, and looking at change management, I think it's important that you analyze. Not only what you're trying to accomplish, but really the processes that drive that. Oftentimes I've seen people that have dove in and try to apply like some of the great, services that we provide, but trying to apply those processes, those applications to, workflows or different things that were intended for, the third generation, the less connected environment. So that'd be my encouragement is just, be wary of your processes and, make sure that you're analyzing those first before you're engaging and applying these things.
So for me, I definitely think the change management piece, we cannot speak to that enough, but I'm going to talk a little bit about customer success. So as a product owner, for me, it's not about how great the product is or how great our implementation partners are in getting the product ready. It's all about that adoption. So from a customer success perspective, for me, that starts at day one on the project when we're doing an implementation. But making sure that the adoption levels are at the highest possible rates. For us, as a product owner, that's what's important, is that you renew and keep using that product year after year. But in terms of the effort and the time and the money that you're investing into your development, making sure that you have that early buy-in and support in making sure that that product is successfully adopted is really, really important, and something you need to think about first, not last.
I love that. So yeah, I'll reiterate that point again. No,
T-shirts made.
we are going to get T-shirts made. I'm excited. No, I think the one thing I want to leave you all with is I know with public sector, resources aren't always available, and it's not easy to get resources. It's not always easy to get funding approved for a lot of different things. So no matter where you are in the process, thinking about that adoption and thinking about what that change management looks like, no matter where you are in that day-to-day, then we can figure out where we can come and help. All of us can. Between Trailhead, our instructor-led training classes, any of the services, any of the partners, we work very well together so we can find a solution with you, and we're willing to get creative for it. So yes, I think that's the biggest piece. Just make sure no matter where you are, just tell us. And then that way we can figure out a solution and get to it.
Well, thank you very much, but let me do this. Let me, at least, excuse me, Jacqueline,
can you take it
I'm
out?
reaching in front of you.
It's okay.
Let me take this microphone. I want to come down to the audience and allow the audience to ask some questions. I think, one of the things that we've talked about too is change management. And in government space, we're all concerned about risk. Risk is probably tantamount to what projects are all about and how to mitigate that risk, especially since it's around the public investment, the public dollar. One of the things that we see, because so many times the ability for the platform to move so quickly sometimes doesn't match up with our customers' pace and what's available to them. And I know sometimes when you have a new project, you're going to bring someone on board that you work with that you know. And maybe that's going to give them now a second job or a third job, and all of a sudden now that project takes a little bit longer. So one of the things we always want to encourage is to really get through Trailhead, go through training, get as proficient as possible so that the person maybe that now has to wear two hats and work two jobs has the ability to maybe delegate and use some of the resources that you have internally through Trailhead to help him or her get that job done more effectively. So with that said, we'd like to ask some questions of this audience. Hopefully you do. Anyone have any questions they'd like to ask? And please don't be bashful. And UC Cipolla, first one, you get the gold star. Always like classroom participation, although you are sitting in the last row, though. So.
Thank you. Yeah, so you already kind of touched on the kind of post-implementation and change management. So that's obviously a concern as these vendor solutions get handed over. So what kind of thoughts any of you might have, like kind of DevOps and automation and change management in general? Would it be smart to use Salesforce DX or possibly any of the vendor tools like Blue Canvas, GearSet, Copado, any of that? Again, talking about like large custom solutions that we are building now for some of the departments. Any thoughts you might have, especially considering that the mix of people managing those systems later on, it's going to be state employees as well as vendor workforce. And then there's a kind of a second question to that is like, what kind of characteristics of the solutions might impact that? Like are there some characteristics of solutions being built that might kind of then demand a different approach to change management, automation, and in general, like how the deployments happen and how the code changes and the fundamental enhancements are actually managed in the future. So kind of a long question, but
Okay. Go for it. Okay. All right, I got you on this. So we're talking technology, just so everybody, just we're all on the same page. Change management from a deployment, managing code, as opposed to user change. I would say definitely recommend things like Salesforce DX, and we've used Copado as well before. I think the consideration is really, you've got to define a process, and that's really the hardest thing that a lot of our clients have to face is, if I don't have a DevOps process, the tools and how you incorporate them into your world can be implemented in so many different ways. And so you can use DevOps tools. I've seen clients use scratch orgs, and then they move into different places. I'm sorry, I'm talking kind of technical now, but I'll kind of bring it a little bit simple. But there's so many ways of where you can execute when this user story comes in for a backlog item, who gets assigned, how does it go into the scratch org versus the main org that is now the dev org and combined, and you're managing code. It's really important, and the tools are available, but the challenge is, to me, is the process. What I've seen organizations really struggle with is Who are the developers? What's going to be the process? And for each step of the process, which tool is used? Where do the stories get changed versus where do they get tagged in, the code tracking tools? Then when do you move them? How do you manage the code changes? The tools are available. It's more like how you're implementing each one. So I would say, yes, you should. If your org is simple, obviously state is going to get more complex because there's a lot of moving parts, especially as if you get into this world where you've got concurrent development, it's going to become definitely very tricky to manage. Right now, I think most of the state orgs don't have too much concurrent development. I think one of them that I'm aware of at least does. And so as some of our commercial clients do have concurrent development, that's where it starts to get very, very important to have a tool to use. If you don't, you can still kind of stay a bit manual using change sets and other things that Salesforce has available to use, and you just have to keep good records and really, check all those details off. But once you have multiple lines of, enhancements, new releases, and all these different things happening, it gets to be a bear to manage. So I don't know if I've completely answered your question, but I would say the biggest challenge that I would see is definitely like figuring out your process. I definitely recommend the tools, but it's the process that I've seen our customers really struggle with.
Sure, yeah, thank you. Do you think we can standardize the process, or does it really depend on the kind of characteristics of each solution? Yeah.
I think it's less on the solution and more on the team. As opposed, because we've had customers, let's say, they already use one tool for keeping track of backlog, and then they have another tool that keeps track of code management, for example. So then how do we fit in the rest of it? And what does each person do? What are all the actors in that? So it's not so much, I would say, the code itself that would drive it. I think it's more what DevOps tools are already in place, how are each one of them being used? So that's kind of what we assess first. And then we go, okay, how can we now, what do we need to bring in to kind of make it a complete process and maybe shuffle a bit of stuff around to make it work? But the tools are there, they're great. I think it's less about how complex your org is and more about what tools are already there, what people are already accustomed to using.
Sure. Okay, yeah, thank you. Any other opinions? Thank you. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks, UC. Any other questions from the audience? Please don't be bashful. Mr. Nakapui. Thank you, Todd. And thank you, Todd, also for your support.
Morning. The one question I have, and this is for being in the private sector now and understanding the struggles that a lot of our public sector employees have, is the fact that I think that a lot of people don't understand how much training is involved. So this question is going to Jacqueline, and I think if you this will help clear up a lot of things that are going on, I think, with individuals. Is how long in your opinion, how long does it take to become a ranger? Right, because that's a tough question to answer, right? Because that's really what the question is for a lot of our public sector employees: is how long does it take? How much time do they have to dedicate to it? Mm-hmm. Because that's really what we need in a lot of our state departments that are taking on the Salesforce journey. Is we need to have admins that are at least at that level and then moving forward.
Yeah, I've seen people do it in 3 months, and there's people on my team now who have been there for 5-10 years and are still not rangers. So I think it's really dependent on how much time you have to dedicate to Salesforce. But I think what you're ultimately asking is not just that ranger status in Trailhead, but also the certification piece. So how long will it take you to get an admin certification or a developer certification, depending on what your role is? And I think the biggest piece there is going to be around how much time have they spent in the platform, using it, going through configuring, customizing Salesforce. What is their experience there? Because I've seen people go through our 5-day admin training and have difficulty passing that exam because it's a really tough exam. I see people who are doing that training and then maybe have 6 months of experience under their belt or are able to use a lot of the things that they learned within that admin training and then being able to pass the test very successfully. So I think it's about finding time, right? Like when are you able to, you already are wearing 4 hats, and then on top of that, you have to take 5 days away to go to this admin training. So I think it's pretty unique to each organization. But definitely important, because also kind of what Deena was saying is that you want to figure out what that process is, what the resources are. So if you have those admins and if you have those developers already certified, you can figure out what you can do more effectively and more efficiently.
I would just add to that.
Yeah, go for it.
Just to add to that, I think something to keep in mind is what the experience of the person is, what their background is. If they're coming from a technical background, they could potentially, and I find myself guilty of doing this, I've started the admin training and then got distracted by, my day-to-day work. So I find myself going back and looking at learning by topic, right? Which is not necessarily the best way to drive towards the certification level, right? So if your background is technical and you're coming into this and you understand, relational databases and things like that, you're going to progress in a much different way than if you're completely new to the technology and you're supporting it more from a business process. Then it is going to be probably better to do a sit down and learn, like plan a strategy to get that certification.
So one other thing, I think one other path to take is, if you're working with an SI in the actual implementation, is ask them for mentorship of staff. We love to do that. We love to have, get to an end of a project and have that person not only go through the formal training, but actually be mentored on the job and learn the platform. Ideally, as you said, go through that and get that experience prior to taking the actual certification exam, because you're gonna pass if you've got that experience. If you're going in cold and you've just sat through 5 days of training, you can find where the buttons are, but you need time to really, intellectualize it and really absorb all the materials. So ask the SI to help you. Ask them to assign a mentor to your admins, and have that person that you've designated as your to-be admin or to-be admins to be part of the project and actually go through and do some configuration and have it checked, and and so on and so forth.
Sorry. Just to add to that, what he was suggesting, write it into your RFPs that you have that knowledge transfer. We have a customer that we're working with now, and they wrote it in. And so from day one, it was all about that knowledge transfer. And we're coming to the end or the conclusion of that project, and the staff really has taken that to heart. We've really focused on making sure that not only do they understand our product, but they understand the basics of being an administrator on the Salesforce platform, and it's been a huge success in the project. So write it in. Yeah.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, one of the things that we want to try to achieve is stickiness. We want the learning, the training to be able to stick. And just as we have Trailhead available as a free online tool, we also know that people learn in different ways. Some people can have great computer-based training and understand it. Other people need to have this, I need to touch Charles, and so that we can have a one-on-one here. And so we have workshops that we have available, and we provide these at no cost. So Ben Alt, who is our Solution Engineering Director for the state and local team, he's going to be up here in a second, and he'll be also talking about developing an application. What we offer is a workshop, and we'll do multiple workshops to be able to get that stickiness, so that, and those are, again, no cost, where we can actually sit in a day. You can know zero about Salesforce. You can be a business analyst, you can be an IT person, you can be someone just off the street, and be able to sit down. We'll have a workbook for you. You have your laptop or your desktop in front of you, and you'll develop an application in one day. That'll also be mobile. That will also have reports and dashboards. That it will now be able to understand how the Salesforce platform works. So those workshops we will do all day long, and they cost zero. And the other aspect, of course, is Trailhead. So we want to have a mix of ways in which you can learn and understand Salesforce, and we're here to help you. I want to be cognizant of time. We are coming up on a networking break. And then after that, after 15 minutes, and please enjoy yourself, have something to drink, we're going to be joined by Ben Alt, who will be going through our Customer 360. And again, you heard Tiffany talk about this, and that's our focus and our passion is around our customers, around you as our customers, and you for your customers, whether you're citizens, residents, or visitors here to this beautiful island. And how can we better improve that engagement and the way in which they can have a better experience. So thank you so much for now. Please applause for our panel. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate this. 15 minutes, and we'll be back here momentarily. Restrooms, men's and women's are that way, as also that way as well. So you have a couple of choices.